Tonight you're slipping back in time, not to a moment of glory or grandeur, but to something more curious, the soft, strange, whispery world of medieval beauty standards. You won't need to pack much. Just bring your imagination a healthy skepticism and a slight tolerance for lead-based powder. Before we begin, take a breath. Let your jaw relax. Maybe pull the blanket up just under your chin the way you did as a child when stories meant safety. And while you're here, if this kind of gentle dive into history helps you sleep, or even just makes your night feel a little less modern, consider subscribing, but only if you really enjoy this sort of thing. No pressure, no guilt trips. That's not how we do things here. You can also leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's oddly comforting to imagine someone across the globe, eyes half-lidded, wrapped in a robe, maybe holding a cup of lukewarm tea, drifting along the same ancient roads with you. Quiet company. Now dim the lights, soften your breathing, and let your mind loosen its grip on the day. You're going back to a time when beauty wasn't filtered, polished, or sponsored. It was raw, it was ruthless, and in some cases, it was very, very pale. Because in the Middle Ages, to be beautiful often meant to resemble someone on the edge of fainting from either poetry or plague. Let's begin. You sit still in the candlelight, your back straight, but not stiff as if someone might be painting your portrait any moment now. The room is cool, stone walls rarely hold warmth, but that's fine. Shivering slightly might even make your cheeks look more delicate. It's the year 1387 and you're considered attractive. Not by modern standards, mind you, by theirs. And that makes all the difference. You see, in this time and place, beauty is a quiet affliction. You aren't aiming to look healthy or fit or cheerful. You're aiming to look untouched, remote, like you belong more to parchment and psalms than to sunlight and laughter. Your skin, it's pale, not soft ivory or cream, but pale like candle wax, like you've never once encountered a summer afternoon. And that's the point. If your complexion reveals even the faintest kiss of the sun, it suggests you've been outdoors, which suggests you've been working, which suggests you're poor. And that simply won't do. So you stay inside. You stay pale. And if your natural skin tone doesn't cooperate, well, the world of medieval cosmetics has a solution. Several, in fact, all of them terrible. But we'll get to the makeup later. First, there's the posture. You sit as if you've just heard delicate news and are politely absorbing it. No slouching, no smirking. Serenity is key. Beauty, after all, isn't just visual, it's behavioral. You must embody restraint. Hunger, too, helps. A slightly hollow cheek is more poetic than a full one. And besides, food is expensive, a fashionable look and economic necessity. A rare 2-for-1. Your hair is hidden beneath a veil or perhaps tied back beneath a crespin. A decorative hairnet made of gold wire if you're wealthy or just wool if you're pretending. Either way, the goal is containment. Hair is beautiful, yes, but not to be flaunted. Too much visibility, and you risk resembling a certain class of women whose beauty is for sale. You're not one of those, at least not publicly. Your hands clasped in your lap are long-fingered and pale, if not naturally then powdered. Your nails are clean, not painted. Painted nails would come much later, and even then only for the scandalous or the Italian. You keep your hands soft with rose water or goose fat, depending on your access and ambition. And then there's the eyes. You lower them. Not dramatically, this isn't a play, but just enough to suggest demureness. Modesty is magnetic. A woman who stares is a woman who wants. A woman who wants is dangerous. Better to look downward as if the weight of your virtue has tilted your gaze. Occasionally you blink slowly like you're remembering something sad but spiritually nourishing. A lost bird, perhaps. A lute melody. The face of your first cousin whom you're probably betrothed to. It's best not to ask. There is a quiet horror to beauty in this era, not because it's gruesome, though it sometimes is, but because it's so tightly bound to suffering. You aren't supposed to look comfortable. You're supposed to look correct. And that correctness in this world means constriction. Constriction of appetite, of expression of presence. You are not to take up too much space. You are in many ways to vanish. You hear footsteps down the hall, slow measured someone of consequence. You lift your chin slightly, just enough to reveal the soft line of your jaw. Not a smile. Smiling shows teeth, and teeth are rarely your best feature. They aren't straight, they aren't white, and they might be slightly medieval. Best to keep your lips together and let your eyes do the talking. Beauty here isn't just about appearance. It's a system, a quiet code passed between tapestries and torchlight. You learn it through observation, imitation, and whispered advice. You learn to remove, not add, to retreat, not advance, to subtract until you are nothing but lace and breath and bone. There's a reason so many portraits from this time show women with vacant expressions and high empty foreheads. They look like they've seen too much and said too little. They look like beauty has happened to them rather than the other way around, and the men they're watching. Not always directly eye contact is risky, but indirectly subtly. They judge you not by your joy or cleverness or capacity to endure childbirth, but by how still you can sit and how little you can say. It's exhausting, of course, but exhaustion is fashionable too. Looking tired, that's spiritual. Looking busy, that's vulgar. You keep your stillness, polished your face, a polite mystery, and your voice barely more than a breeze through chapel glass. And as you finally rise, robes trailing spine straight, your footsteps soft, you realize you aren't walking. You're floating. Because in the medieval world, the more you resemble a painting, the closer you are to perfection. The candle flickers, catching the edge of your powdered cheek. The shadows agree you are beautiful, not because of what you are, but because of what you've hidden, what you've sacrificed, what you've learned to erase. Tomorrow they'll call it radiance. But tonight in this quiet stone room, you simply exist, ghost-like, graceful, gone. You wake up with the faintest outline of light breaking through the shuttered slats of your chamber window. Not that the sun matters. It never really does. In your world, sunlight is something to be avoided the way you might avoid a noisy servant or an unexpected tax. The ideal you're striving toward quietly without admitting it aloud isn't health or joy or even vibrancy. It's pallor, paleness, a washed-out complexion so luminous it might startle a raven in flight. And not just any kind of pale. Not that healthy apple-cheeked winter fair look you'd associate with Scandinavian royals or modern skincare commercials. No. In the Middle Ages, the desired shade was nearly spectral, almost bluish. Your veins should show if possible, especially the ones on your temples or your hands. That was elegance. That was elite. That was a declaration written directly into your skin. I do not work. I do not sweat. I have never harvested a turnip in my life. Of course, some people were born with the right kind of skin, but most weren't. So nature got a little help. Face powders were common, often made of crushed oyster shells, bone ash, or for those with coin and questionable judgment, white lead. Just a light dusting of poison to start the day. Because nothing said, "Good morning, I am very rich," quite like applying the same substances used to preserve corpses onto your face, with a soft squirrel hair puff. If you were feeling extra bold or desperate, you might even mix your lead powder with vinegar or egg white to create a smooth paste that could be layered across your cheeks and chin. It would crack as the day went on, of course, but even that had a certain tragic charm. A beautiful woman with a face like fine porcelain, gently flaking under the stress of existing what could be more fashionable. But remember, all of this only worked in contrast. Pale skin was desirable because it was rare, or rather because it was hard to maintain unless you had money and time and absolutely no reason to go outside. If your family owned land, you didn't work it. If your husband had titles, you didn't touch his accounts. And if your servants were properly trained, you didn't need to lift a finger except, of course, to delicately powder your nose. And so your days were spent indoors, curtains drawn, skin untouched by weather or work. If you were particularly committed, you might even avoid fireside heat lest your cheeks grow too warm and accidentally attractive. Color, after all, was the enemy, unless it was controlled, manufactured, and strategically placed. But natural flush, that was vulgar. Your meals, too, were designed with your complexion in mind. Heavy meat and wine made your skin blotchy, so you opted for lighter fare fish herbs, a little honey water. Dairy was encouraged, not because of calcium or nutrition, but because it was thought to cool the body and promote whiteness from the inside out. Yes, people really believed you could eat your way to elegance. You might even have avoided laughter. That sounds ridiculous now, but it's true. Laughter was said to stir the blood, bringing unwanted color to your face and disrupting your composure. Instead, you smiled quietly inwardly, like someone amused by a private thought you'd never dare share. Even bathing, rare and ritualized though it was sometimes a calculated act of cosmetic maintenance. A soak in milk or rosewater was said to preserve softness, while herbs like parsley or sage were believed to lighten the skin when rubbed into it. There were even cases of noblewomen paying to be bled, yes, with leeches or lancets, in the hopes that their paleness would become more pronounced in the aftermath. Of course, not everyone bought into this ideal. There were dissenters. Some poets, especially in the later medieval period, began to describe women with golden skin or wind-bitten cheeks, especially in more pastoral or regional texts. But these were exceptions. For the most part, the mainstream narrative remained firm. Beauty was pale, passive, and preferably just a little bit tragic. And there were always the social cues, the subtle insults. If someone called you sun-kissed, it wasn't a compliment. It meant you'd been careless, negligent, possibly working, possibly sweating, or worse, walking. Even a walk in the garden was suspect if it left your forehead glistening or your chest lightly freckled. Beauty in this time was a delicate performance of stillness, of absence. Historians still argue whether these beauty ideals were purely aesthetic or if they were intertwined more deeply with the era's obsession with hierarchy and piety. Was paleness a sign of wealth, a mark of divine favor, or simply an exaggerated response to a world where disease and death were constant companions, and fragility became romantic? Whatever the case, the result was clear. You were expected to appear as though you had already died beautifully, or were at least rehearsing for it. Your complexion wasn't just your calling card, it was your armor. And like all armor, it needed constant polishing. So you powdered, you protected, you positioned yourself near windows for soft filtered light, but never direct sun. You wore long sleeves in the summer and carried veils even indoors. Some women went further, wearing broad-brimmed hats, lined with gauze or lace veils draped from the forehead to chin. Not modesty, strategy, sun protection, a medieval SPF. There were even beauty manuals, rudimentary handwritten, and often copied from monastery apothecaries, that described recipes for skin-whitening pastes and poultices. One suggested mixing crushed pearl with goat's milk and rosewater. Another advised rubbing crushed snails on the face, claiming it softened the skin and repelled darkening. Both were expensive. Both were likely useless. But when has that ever stopped anyone in pursuit of beauty? In the rare case that you did have to venture outside, perhaps to Mass, or a family obligation, you would do so, wrapped like a winter root vegetable. Layers of linen and wool gloves on your hands, bonnet tight around your head. You moved like a whisper. You existed like a shadow. You showed nothing. That was the goal. And yet, paradoxically, you were constantly being watched, judged, compared. You were a living canvas, and everyone around you, from the maid who fixed your veil to the nobleman. 3 benches over at church was mentally rating your execution of the aesthetic. Too flushed, too sweaty, too alive docked points. The irony, of course, is that in a world so obsessed with purity and beauty, few people actually looked beautiful by modern standards. The cosmetics were toxic. The grooming was rare, the lighting was grim, and the diet was unforgiving. But none of that mattered. Because the standard wasn't reality, it was ideal. And ideals don't need to be realistic. They just need to be unattainable enough to keep people reaching, and you're still reaching. Gently, gracefully, with one gloved hand adjusting your wimple in the mirrorless glow of dawn, hoping that today you might look just pale enough for someone to notice. Not for admiration, of course. That would be too forward. No, just enough to be quietly acknowledged, silently envied, softly praised in whispers you'll never hear. After all, you are beautiful, and no one needs to say it aloud. The mirror doesn't exist yet. Not the kind you're thinking of anyway. In your world, the early 15th century, a mirror might be a polished disc of brass, or the back of a spoon held in just the right light. Most of the time, your reflection is something you feel more than see. You trust the handmaid who dabs powder along your jawline, or the friend who leans in and whispers that your cheek is streaking. That's all the confirmation you need. And why does it matter so much? Because every layer of your face is crafted. And when we say crafted, we don't mean the kind of light touch you might associate with modern skincare. We mean full-scale chemical warfare against your own skin with a smile. You begin with your base, the foundation of all beauty, so to speak. And in the medieval world, that base is made of white lead. Yes, lead. The same substance later used in ammunition and plumbing, now delicately pressed into the soft planes of your face. Lead carbonate or ceruse is mixed with vinegar or egg whites and applied generously. The effect is chalky matte and devastatingly pale, which is precisely the point. You know it stings a little, maybe even burns if the mixture was too fresh or left out in the heat. But pain in your era is no stranger to beauty. You endure it with grace. In fact, many beauty regimens of your time involve substances we now classify as poisonous. Not metaphorically poisonous literally. Arsenic appears in some recipes, mercury in others. Even ground-up alabaster, which isn't toxic, but is certainly not meant to enter your bloodstream, has its moment. Mainstream historical fact. In 16th century England and France, building upon earlier medieval practices, ceruse, a compound of white lead, became the favored cosmetic base among noblewomen. Queen Elizabeth the Fine famously wore it to maintain her unnaturally white complexion. But the trend originated earlier in the late Middle Ages, especially in Italy and France, where wealthy women sought a powdered look associated with purity, nobility, and leisure. But not everyone could afford lead. Some women settled for ground chalk flour or crushed bone. They didn't provide quite the same luminosity, but they also didn't rot your skin quite as fast. Because here's the thing about lead, it doesn't just sit on your face. It seeps in, slowly, day after day. It causes hair loss, digestive issues, paralysis, even death. And yet that was a risk many were willing to take. After all, death by beauty, that's practically romantic. Once your base is set, blotted and smoothed, until it looks less like a face and more like parchment, you move on to other enhancements. Perhaps a little soot rubbed beneath the eyes. Maybe a touch of carmine boiled beetles in case you're wondering on the lips or cheeks. And if you're truly ambitious, you might try adding a false beauty mark, made of mouse fur or crushed velvet, placed just near the mouth to draw attention without seeming too deliberate. But nothing compares to the lead. It is the crown jewel of your cosmetic arsenal. And as you sit in the early light watching a servant grind fresh powder in a mortar, you feel both anticipation and dread. Will it sting again today? Will the corner of your mouth crack like it did yesterday? You won't know until after Mass, when the expressionless mask finally begins to peel. The powder clings especially well to dry skin, which is lucky because most medieval skin is chronically dry. Baths are rare, moisturizers non-existent. You might have rose water or goose fat, but they do little to combat the effects of hard winters and indoor fires. Your face is in a way the battlefield layered, chapped then layered again. Some women try to heal the damage with concoctions of honey and herbs. Others apply raw milk compresses or cooled boiled leeks to soothe the burning. And then there are the wealthier few who use fine cloth soaked in vinegar and white wine to refresh the skin. Of course, this only delays the inevitable. Skin subjected to daily lead applications eventually begins to gray, blister, and thin. But again, this is part of the look. There's a kind of prestige in fragility. If your cheeks are flushed and glowing, people assume you've been running, working, doing something unrefined. But if your face is pale, stiff, and slightly cracked, you must be someone who matters, someone who sits, someone who's observed, not spent. Quirky historical tidbit. In some parts of Italy, women believed that soaking leeches in vinegar and placing them on the skin would drain excess blood from the face, making it paler. Vinegar-soaked leeches. Imagine lying still while that squirming symbol of medieval medicine works its magic on your cheekbone, all for the chance to appear slightly closer to fainting than your rivals. And yes, men noticed. They were expected to. Though men's cosmetics were subtler, mostly perfumes or light powdering, they still understood the rules. A woman with a flushed face was considered bold, even sinful. A woman with a pale powdered face, regardless of how artificial, was seen as respectable, dignified, almost divine. This idea that divine beauty equals artificiality is something modern minds struggle with. Today, we tend to praise natural beauty, the kind that glows without effort. But in the medieval world, beauty was all about effort. Laborious, painful, time-consuming effort. The more time you spent in preparation, the more valuable you were perceived to be. After all, peasants didn't have time to paint their faces or rest in shadow. Only the wealthy could afford to make themselves look this unnatural. And the irony, the more artificial the face, the more it was seen as a reflection of one's true character. Smooth skin suggested discipline. Pallor suggested grace. The mask was the message. Historians still debate just how widespread lead-based makeup use really was. Some believe it was limited to the upper nobility, while others argue it was more common than we think, at least among the wealthy merchant class in cities like Florence, Bruges, and Avignon. Regardless, the fear of aging blemishes, and even slight pigmentation, ran deep. It wasn't just about beauty, it was about morality. A flawed face suggested a flawed soul, and so even as sores developed and teeth began to loosen from poisoned gums, the ritual continued. Day after day, dusting, blotting, applying, scraping. You kept going, because the alternative, being seen as ordinary, was worse. In some cases, women began wearing thin veils over their faces indoors, claiming modesty or mourning, but truly hoping to hide the damage. In portraits, the artists helped too, airbrushing by brushstroke, turning cracked skin into smooth ivory. The image endured. The reality stayed hidden. So you sit by the window again. The powder's already on, but you're holding the puff, gently dabbing the corners. You don't want to smile. Smiling deepens the cracks. You don't want to frown either, that causes lines. The best expression is none at all. You think briefly about the girl you used to be before the powder, before the rules. You remember laughter, sunshine, red cheeks from running. And then you remember how people looked at you when you were pink-faced and glowing. They didn't praise. They didn't whisper in envy. They just turned away. So you press the puff once more into your cheek. You watch the dust rise, then settle. You are pale now. You are perfect. You are slowly disappearing. The candle is lit again. A low flame no taller than your thumb flickers gently beside your chamber mirror, or rather your polished silver dish. You peer into it with the focus of someone inspecting a battlefield, not a face. What you're searching for this time isn't blemish or blotch, but something even more subversive, a hairline that's too low, a forehead that's too human. Because in your world, the higher the forehead, the higher the status. Literally. The ideal medieval woman doesn't just have a wide brow, she has a deep, looming alabaster forehead that stretches halfway up the scalp. Think of it as a blank page, untouched, unreadable, and faintly disapproving. It's not that your natural hairline is too low, it's just not fashionable. And fashion in this age doesn't wait for nature. So you reach for the tools of transformation tweezers, a strip of warm cloth and something sharp, a knife if you're desperate. You're not going to cut, you're going to pluck, slowly, deliberately, painfully. Hair by hair, you inch your hairline upward. The first few are easy, thinner, cooperative. But the deeper you go into the scalp, the more stubborn they become. The skin protests. It reddens. But you persist, because every removed strand brings you closer to elegance. Mainstream historical fact. During the late medieval and early Renaissance periods, particularly among the noble classes in England, France and northern Italy, women commonly plucked the front of their hairlines to achieve a higher forehead. This trend was so widespread that grooming manuals from the 14th and 15th centuries openly recommended it. Contemporary portraits, from manuscripts to oil paintings, depict noble women with dramatically receded hairlines and expressionless brows. And it doesn't stop there. Once your hairline has been corrected, you turn to your eyebrows. They must go, not shaped or trimmed removed, entirely. A single strand left too long or too dark could spoil the illusion. The ideal brow is non-existent. A smooth plane of pale skin above the eyes interrupted by nothing, as if the emotion has been ironed out of your face altogether. Of course, eyebrows serve a purpose. They catch sweat frame expressions, hint at mood. But in your world, such functions are irrelevant or worse, inappropriate. You're not here to be expressive. You're here to be composed, reserved, a living fresco, not a participant. There are days when the plucking is too much. Your skin swells. Tiny red bumps appear along the brow ridge. That's when you resort to medieval depilatories, homemade creams and salves designed to kill the follicle, or at the very least discourage it. Their recipes read like a witch's grocery list vinegar, quicklime, crushed beans, arsenic, and most memorably cat dung. Quirky historical tidbit. Some 14th century grooming manuscripts recommend a hair removal paste made by mixing burned cat feces, vinegar, and powdered bat bones applied hot to the scalp or brow area. Let it sit until your skin tingles, or until your sense of smell gives out, then wipe it away. If you're lucky, the hair goes with it. There is no perfume strong enough to cover the smell of this paste, but you endure it, because in your world, pain and odor are fleeting. Reputation is not. And so you sit there, cheeks powdered, eyes, bare forehead gleaming. You look serene, empty, sculpted. You look like someone who understands her place. The goal isn't to be admired exactly. It's to be acknowledged silently, distantly, as someone who has mastered herself. Even the church doesn't object too loudly. While vanity is technically a sin, these practices are not seen as prideful. Quite the opposite. They're regarded as signs of discipline. A woman who controls her face must also control her impulses. A woman with no eyebrows surely has no time for temptation. Still, there are voices soft dissenting who question this pursuit. Some midwives, herbalists, and older women mutter that high foreheads invite headaches, that plucked brows allow illness to enter through the eyes, that too much powder poisons the blood. These warnings are whispered, not written, but you hear them. Historians still argue whether these beauty rituals were truly as widespread as the portraits suggest, or if they were reserved for only the highest nobility and those wishing to mimic them. After all, it's not easy to maintain this look. It requires time tools and tolerance. It requires you to remove not just the outer signs of emotion, but also the inner ones. And perhaps not everyone had the patience or the inclination. But you do. You've seen the paintings. Women in silk eyes like polished stones, foreheads that gleam under golden halos. You want that. Not the silk necessarily, or even the halo, just the distance, the power of being untouchable. And so you continue. You press a damp cloth against your brow. You reapply your lead-based powder, smooth it with a piece of linen. You look again at your reflection. The shape of your skull is more visible now. That's good. It gives the illusion of wisdom, because in this world a large forehead is associated with intelligence. It suggests that your mind has more room to grow, more space to hold prayers, secrets, or poetry. A small forehead. That's peasantry. That's emotion. That's labor. And you are none of those things. At least not in public. There's another reason to keep your brow blank. It confuses your suitors. Men find it difficult to read a woman whose face gives nothing away. They project their own desires onto your stillness. They invent meanings. They assume depth. And in doing so, they fall in love not with you, but with the silence you wear like a veil. So you keep plucking. You keep quiet. You keep becoming less, until your face is not a face anymore, but a canvas, an idea, a reflection of what society wants most. A beautiful woman who doesn't need to speak because she's already been spoken for. And as you sit there, scalp-tingling eyes wide and empty, you realize something peculiar. You do look intelligent. You do look noble. And for the first time, you almost believe it. The morning is quiet, save for the soft clinking of a silver spoon against a clay bowl. Your maid is mixing something, berries maybe. Crushed flower petals, possibly. Whatever it is, it will soon become color. And that color, if applied correctly, will rest on your cheekbones for the rest of the day. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to look convincingly like you've never spent a single second thinking about rouge, even as it slowly stains your fingertips pink. Blush in your time is a delicate thing, both socially and chemically. It's made from berries, beetroot, madder root, cochineal beetles if you're lucky, and sometimes, though, less ideally animal blood. It stains the skin gently at first, then stubbornly if left to dry too long. But whether you use a finger, a cloth, or the corner of a rag, the application follows the same rule: moderation. Because in the medieval world, the boundary between beauty and scandal is the width of a single extra dab. To appear naturally flushed is charming. To appear too flushed, that's dangerous. It suggests exertion. It suggests heat, passion, boldness, all qualities that, depending on who's in the room, might make someone whisper that you resemble a woman of the night, or in particularly unkind circles, a woman from France. Mainstream historical fact. In late medieval and early Renaissance Europe, especially in England and Italy, women used natural dyes like crushed roses, red ochre, or vermilion to tint their cheeks. But excessive rouge was often frowned upon. Writings from the period, including sermons and moral treatises, linked heavy cosmetic use with immodesty, vanity, or association with prostitution. Among the most notorious beauty trends was the heavy use of red coloring by French courtesans, which became shorthand for dangerously forward in polite English society. And so the modest English noblewoman or the pious Flemish lady might pinch her cheeks lightly, or rub a bit of wine-dipped cloth across her face, but never too enthusiastically. Color was to be a suggestion, not a proclamation. It was a whisper in the candlelight, not a banner in the street. Which is why you sit by your little window, angled just so, using the sun's reflection to assess your progress. You dab a bit of beet juice on your finger, tap it softly onto the high points of your cheek. Then you stop, wait, lean back. You don't want to look delighted. You want to look faintly warmed, as if you've just exited a chapel or heard a minor compliment. Anything more intense and someone might think you've been running. Or worse thinking. What's strange, though, is how arbitrary the line is. You've seen women praised for their innocent flush, then condemned for the same shade a week later during Lent. You've heard of noble girls being scolded for appearing too lively in the face while visiting other courts. The rules shift with the wind, the region, the rumor. Quirky historical tidbit. In some circles, if your rouge smudged, say during a dance or a sudden turn of the head, it was said to be a courtesan's kiss. Not because anyone had kissed you, but because the stain left behind resembled the mark of someone too used to being touched. A mark that might earn you admiration in one court and exile in another. And then there's the matter of tools. You don't have brushes. Not the kind with bristles, anyway. You use what's on hand: a cloth, a feather, a fingertip, or the corner of a bread crust wrapped in wool. Application is more art than science, and mirror access is inconsistent. So you do your best by feel and hope the maid is honest enough to tell you if you look like you've been slapped. Not that honesty is always appreciated. If someone says you look flushed, you pretend not to notice. If they say you look radiant, you offer a faint smile as if surprised to hear it. If they say nothing, you consider the possibility that your rouge has failed you, that you are invisible, that you have in a way already disappeared. Because beauty in this world isn't loud, it's not colorful, it's not confident, it's quietly executed like embroidery or needlepoint, impressive only if someone bothers to look closely. And if they don't, well, that's your fault for being too obvious, or too subtle, or just too present. You've seen what happens when the balance tips. A woman at court last spring was sent home early after someone accused her of French sympathies, her only crime. A bit of rouge that didn't quite blend near her jawline. It caught the light the wrong way. Someone whispered. A priest stared. And just like that, her father recalled her. Her name wasn't spoken again until Christmas. Historians still argue whether this moral panic around makeup was driven more by religion, class anxiety, or misogyny. Probably all three. But in any case, the result was clear: too much rouge could ruin your future. A little, though, just a little, might catch a husband's eye. Or better yet, the eye of his mother. So you paint yourself in whispers, in sighs, in barely there tints that fade faster than gossip. And when someone notices, you pretend they didn't. You fold your hands, lower your gaze, and thank the saints that your secret hasn't stained your reputation yet. Later, when the sun is lower and the candles are lit, you'll reapply. Carefully. Maybe with a bit of crushed rose if the beet juice has worn thin. You'll press it into the skin, not too high, never too low, and then sit quietly by the fire as if your face were born that way. And maybe someone will glance your way. Maybe they'll think she's delicate. She's soft. She's quiet. Maybe they won't realize the hours of alchemy it took to become that fleeting impression. But you will. And tomorrow you'll do it again. Because in the medieval world, the trick is not to look painted. It's to look impossible. The candle has burned low by now, casting long shadows across the wall, where your comb rests beside a bundle of herbs, and something that once resembled a ribbon. You're preparing for the most treacherous part of your beauty routine. Not the powders, not the lead paste, not even the vinegar-soaked leeches. No, tonight it's the hair. Hair in your world is a holy paradox. It must be long, thick, and golden if possible, but never wild, never free. It's supposed to be your crowning glory, but worn like a secret. Seen but not shown. Possessed but restrained. You're told your hair is your virtue. And like all virtues, it's best kept tucked out of sight, and only revealed to those who've earned the privilege. You begin with the detangling. There is no conditioner, no leave-in serum, no modern miracle. Just your comb, wooden, wide-toothed, and occasionally splintered, and the steady patience of someone who understands that beauty is always slower than pain. You start at the ends, working upward, pausing at the knots that tug against your scalp like old memories. Your arms ache before you reach the top, but that's nothing new. And the smell, that depends. You haven't washed your hair in days, maybe weeks, because in medieval Europe, full body bathing is suspicious, and washing your hair too frequently even more so. People believe it causes headaches, fevers, even madness. Some physicians warn that washing the head could unbalance the body's humors, allowing illness to enter through the scalp. Best not to risk it. Mainstream historical fact. In most of medieval Europe, especially before the late 15th century, hair washing was rare and often discouraged, particularly among women. It was commonly believed that frequent wetting of the head could weaken the brain, disrupt internal balance, or increase vulnerability to illness. Instead, hair was maintained using dry methods, brushing perfume powders, and herbal rinses that didn't involve full immersion. So instead of water, you freshen your hair with dry techniques. You sprinkle lavender, rosemary, or crushed rose petals into your brush and work them through. If you're wealthy, you might have access to orris root powder, fragrant and finely ground from the iris flower. It smells faintly like violets and dust. You run it through your strands with care, trying not to choke on the tiny clouds it raises. On good days, your hair smells like a well-kept herb garden. On bad days, it smells like whatever the fire smoke caught last grease-boiled onions or worse. But no one tells you, not directly. That would be rude. Instead, they lean a little further away at court, or offer you a scented cloth at prayer. The message is clear. So you adjust. You pin your hair tightly beneath a linen coif or netted veil, depending on your station. Perhaps one woven with silk threads or even gold. A noblewoman might wear a crespine jeweled and delicate resting, just above the nape like a crown, pretending not to be one. The more modest women cover with simple wimples or veils, leaving not even a strand exposed. Hair is dangerous after all. A snare for men. A lure for sin. Quirky historical tidbit. In some medieval texts, especially in sermons and conduct guides, uncovered hair was described as the devil's fishing net, capable of catching unsuspecting male souls and dragging them to damnation. As absurd as it sounds now, this metaphor appeared frequently in religious writings, reinforcing the idea that a woman's hair, if left visible, was an open invitation to lust. And yet, you take pride in it, in private. You run your fingers through it when no one is looking. You admire the way it catches candlelight. You try to forget the stories, the saints who cut off their hair to avoid temptation, the martyrs who were punished for wearing it loose. You know better than to let it fall freely outside your room. But in your own chamber after hours, when the shutters are closed and the house quiet, you sometimes unbind it entirely. You let it cascade down your back like a forgotten river. You breathe in the faint scent of lavender and ash. You become for a moment someone softer than duty allows. And then you braid. Braiding is more than a practical task. It's an art, a ritual. The repetition calms your mind even as your fingers move automatically over underpull tight. Some women weave ribbons into their braids. Others tuck tiny sprigs of dried herbs inside, hoping for dreams or protection. You've heard of one girl who hid a pressed flower from a suitor in her hair, then forgot about it for so long that it turned to powder between the strands. There are regional differences, of course. In Italy, noble women favor intricate double braids coiled over their ears like wheels. In England, it's more common to see long single plaits, hidden under elaborate headdresses. In France, they've begun experimenting with horned hennons, those towering cone-shaped hats that suggest your hair has disappeared, entirely replaced by architectural ambition. Historians still argue whether these trends were truly about modesty or simply another form of social display. Was covering your hair a religious duty, a fashion statement, a signal of wealth? In truth, it was all of these. Beauty was never just about looking good. It was about being seen in the right way by the right people at the right time. And so you cover your braids before dawn. You fold them beneath your veil with practiced hands. You pin the final edges into place, making sure no strand escapes. Not because you're ashamed, not exactly, but because you know the world outside your chamber doesn't want your hair. It wants your symbol, your silence, your obedience. Still, when no one's watching you, allow yourself one indulgence. You lift the edge of the veil just enough to feel the weight of your own hair against your neck. You smile not widely, but just a fraction, and tuck the feeling away like a secret. Later, when you walk through the corridor and someone nods respectfully, you'll pretend it's because of your posture or your prayerfulness. But deep down, you'll know it's also the hair hidden, perfect and wholly under your control. And that control is what makes you beautiful. Not the golden strands, not the scent of crushed herbs, but the fact that no one sees it unless you let them. You're not speaking tonight. That's part of the performance. A woman in your position doesn't chatter, doesn't fill the room with stories or laughter. She's quiet, elegant, reserved, and beautifully mute like a portrait that somehow learned to breathe. Your words, if they come at all, arrive in measured syllables and float just above a whisper. Not because you lack opinions, but because your breath must be managed. Not metaphorically, literally. Because in your time, everyone's breath smells, and the only real beauty is found in how well you hide it. It's not that you're unclean. Far from it. You've chewed the herbs. You've rinsed your mouth with wine and sage and mint. You've even dabbed your tongue with cloves, hoping for a few minutes of freshness before the meal. But nothing lingers. Not when your diet includes onions, salted meats, and goat's cheese that's been slightly too enthusiastic about ripening. And not when you brush your teeth with linen and vinegar, if you brush at all. So you do what every noblewoman does. You master the art of distance. Your conversations take place at arm's length. You angle your face slightly to the side as you speak, your fan hovering just below your lips like a guard. When you laugh, which is rare, it's mostly in your eyes. And when someone leans in too close, you tilt away like a candle dodging the wind. It's not rude. It's refined. Mainstream historical fact. In the medieval period, oral hygiene practices varied by region and class, but bad breath was common and largely expected. Tooth powders made from crushed herbs chalk or burnt rosemary were occasionally used by the wealthy, along with mouth rinses made from vinegar or wine. However, there was no concept of toothpaste or toothbrushes as we know them today. Instead, people used cloths or chewed on aromatic herbs to cleanse the mouth. Among noble circles, it became customary to maintain physical distance, while speaking not only for etiquette, but to avoid offending others with natural odors. Your fan in this world is not just decoration, it's defense. It wafts the scent of your rosewater-drenched sleeves toward others, while simultaneously pushing their breath away. It gives your hands something to do when your mind is busy counting how many cloves you still have tucked in your pouch. And it lends an air of mystery. You hide behind it. You flirt with it. You survive with it. Your sleeves, too, carry fragrance. Before you left your chamber, you rubbed crushed lavender and rosemary into the linen. It won't last long. Most scents fade after an hour, but it's enough to give the impression of freshness. And impressions in your world are everything. You don't need to smell good. You just need to smell better than the alternative. And then there are the pomanders. Little metal globes no larger than a walnut filled with dried herbs, spices or resin, and worn on a chain or pinned to your bodice. Yours contains cloves, cinnamon bark sage leaves, and just for good measure something called powder of roses, which may or may not actually include roses. You clutch it gently when walking past others, letting its scent precede you like a courteous fog. Quirky historical tidbit. Some noble women were known to carry apple pomanders, hollowed-out fruits filled with spices and then sealed with wax. These makeshift perfumes would be pierced with a needle to allow the scent to escape slowly throughout the day. Not only did they mask bad breath and body odor, but they also helped ward off disease, or so it was believed. Scent, after all, was tied to health. If something smelled foul, it was probably dangerous. So now you walk soft-footed through the hall, your mouth closed, and your posture perfect. You are a picture of poise. Someone calls your name. You pause. Turn. Smile without parting your lips. Offer a low nod. That's enough. Because saying too much or saying it too closely is not just impolite, it's revealing. And beauty in your world should never reveal. It should suggest, evoke, drift. There are times in private when you try to test yourself. You breathe into your cupped hand, lean in, try to judge. Is it terrible? Is it tolerable? You never quite know. You sip mint water again, chew a fennel seed, hold a piece of dried orange peel in your cheek. But none of it lasts. Your mouth is, after all, as medieval as everything else around you. Historians still argue about the full extent of medieval hygiene practices. Were noblewomen truly meticulous? Or were they simply better at hiding the inevitable? Some suggest that the focus on perfume herbs and scented cloths was a direct result of the lack of effective cleaning methods. Others point out that many women did what they could with what they had, but never truly solved the problem. What they did solve, however, was how to move through the world without drawing attention to their imperfections. And that meant silence, stillness, subtlety. You recall the girl at court last season, the one who laughed too loud too long. People said she was forward, that her breath gave her away, that she tried too hard. You remember her bright cheeks, her wide smile, the way her words filled the hall like music. And you remember how quickly that music stopped. No one says where she went, only that she isn't here now. So you fold your fan, shift your weight to the other foot. You practice a breath shallow, discreet through your nose. You are safe, controlled, beautiful. And when someone new enters the hall, a man perhaps with flushed cheeks and a hopeful look, you do not speak. You glance up through your lashes, offer a single nod, and if he comes closer than expected, you let your fan rise between you, not as rejection, as choreography. This is the dance. You both know the steps. Later in your chamber, you'll peel off your linen coif and untie your sleeves. The scent of rosemary will cling to your wrists. You'll swish your mouth with cool wine and chew another clove more out of habit than hope. You'll think about the day, the smiles you gave, the breath you never risked. And you'll realize that no one truly heard you. Not once. Not in the words, at least. But they saw you. And in this time, that is enough. The hall is warmer than it should be. A fire crackles in the great hearth, and the scent of roasting meat rolls lazily through the air. You shift in your chair not from discomfort, but to position yourself at the proper angle for watching. Not everyone gathered here tonight is female, and now that you've perfected the art of stillness, silence, and strategic paleness, it's time to study the other half of the performance. The men. In your world, beauty isn't just a woman's burden. It's everyone's, though men wear it differently. Where your elegance is measured in composure and concealment, theirs is crafted through posture poetics and an appearance of unbothered nobility. A medieval man must look like he's recently survived a duel, written a tragic sonnet about it, and then moved on without ever wrinkling his tunic. His skin should be pale, but not as pale as yours. He's allowed a little color, especially around the cheeks, a healthy flush that says, "I've been hawking," rather than "I've been hoeing turnips." His hair should be thick, wavy, if possible golden, if he's lucky, or at least dusted with a good oil, and parted in a flattering way. If he has a beard, it's trimmed, not wild. If he's clean-shaven, even better. He's showing discipline. Mainstream historical fact. During the later medieval period, especially across Western Europe, in the 14th and 15th centuries, male beauty standards emphasized pale skin, high foreheads, broad shoulders, and elegant posture. Poetic accounts and portraits from the nobility often described men in terms of their grace, intellect, and symmetry, rather than brute strength. Thick, well-kept hair, often shoulder-length, and occasionally curled, was considered especially attractive, and some men even used heated tongs to shape it. The ideal nobleman was not only a warrior, but also a thinker, a musician, a courtly lover. And so the man you're watching now, standing just beside the fire cup in hand, recounting some story of falcons or philosophy, he plays the part. His posture is relaxed but not lazy. His gaze is steady but not invasive. He doesn't need to raise his voice. People lean in when he speaks. That's part of the charm. You wonder briefly how long it took him to get ready. Men never speak of such things, but you've caught glimpses of the process. The oiling of the hair, the brushing of the tunic, the careful arrangement of the belt and dagger meant to suggest readiness without aggression. The balance is delicate, appear capable of battle but not enthusiastic about it. His shoes are soft leather laced tightly. His hands are clean, even manicured. Some noblemen file their nails into smooth ovals, a detail many dismiss, but never forget once seen. You've heard of men who bathe their hands in rosewater before court events, who sleep in linen gloves to preserve the texture of their palms. You recall one particular knight who powdered his forehead lightly with chalk to better match his lace collar. He claimed it kept him cool during Mass, but everyone knew it was vanity. Quiet, powdered, poetic vanity. Quirky historical tidbit. In the Burgundian court of the late 15th century, some men carried pocket mirrors hidden in their sleeves, allowing them to check their appearance discreetly throughout the evening. These grooming tokens were considered fashionable among dandies, young men known for their elegance and theatrical romanticism. Far from being mocked, they were often envied. The line between elegance and excess was just as thin for men as it was for women. A man who appeared too eager in his grooming might be accused of effeminacy or courtly pretense. A man who ignored it altogether risked being mistaken for a laborer, or worse, someone from the countryside. And so, like you men, learned to perfect the illusion of effortlessness. They recited verses by heart, composed letters in neat Latin, carried gloves scented with crushed clove and lemon balm. Some even lightened their skin using a diluted version of your lead-based powder, though never enough to outshine the women. That would be indecent. Historians still debate the extent to which male beauty standards affected everyday men versus the nobility. There's no denying that peasants and tradesmen had other concerns, survival for one. But within courtly life, appearances were currency, and men who knew how to spend it wisely found themselves richer in alliances' favors and whispered admiration. You watch as another man enters the room, taller, broader, a little less graceful. He smiles too widely. His laughter is sincere, which is to say, dangerous. People glance at him, then quickly look away. It's not that he's unattractive. It's that he hasn't mastered the art of seeming uninterested in his own appeal. And in your world, self-awareness is poison. The most attractive men are aloof. Just enough distance to seem noble. Just enough melancholy to be mysterious. You've read poems about such men heroes, who longed for unattainable women, who sighed beneath tapestries, who played the lute like they were apologizing to God. But you've also met them, and you know that most don't write their own poems. Still, you admire the performance. You note the way the favored young lord leans into the firelight, just so how the flicker casts shadows along his jaw. He's practiced this, surely, just as you've practiced the tilt of your fan, the depth of your bow. And somewhere in this choreographed silence, beauty lingers. His coat yours, his breath yours. You are separate but aligned, two polished objects in a world that values polish above truth. Later, when the music starts, you'll dance. Not with abandon, but with geometry. The courtly dance is measured 3 steps forward, a bow 2 steps back. No touching, no spinning, just orbiting, like planets who are too noble to collide. And in that orbit, you'll trade glances. You'll nod. Maybe he'll speak. Maybe he won't. It doesn't matter. In your time, romance is built on restraint, not revelation. You glance away from the hearth. Your hand adjusts your veil. He moves closer, not enough to speak, but enough to be noticed. And for now, that is everything. The firelight dims behind you as you slip further into a different time, a different world. The stone walls and candlelit corridors of medieval Europe melt away, and now the air is drier, brighter marble instead of limestone olive trees, where there were once pines. You're no longer seated beside a smoky hearth in York or Burgundy. You're reclining gracefully, of course, on a cushioned couch in ancient Greece. And here, too, beauty reigns. But it does so differently. In this land of philosophers, gods, and the ever-watchful muses, beauty is less a performance and more a divine equation. The Greeks didn't just admire beauty, they measured it. They named it, shaped it, and immortalized it in stone. To be beautiful in ancient Greece was not just to be admired, it was to reflect cosmic order. To walk with symmetry, to stand with balance, to embody the golden ratio, not just in your face, but in your soul. For women, the ideals were soft but precise. A round face, a high forehead, a gentle chin, not too prominent, not too sharp, eyes large and wide-set, with lids that dipped delicately over dark irises. The lips small, bowed slightly parted, hair curled or waved ideally thick, ideally honey-colored bound in braids or left loose in carefully arranged chaos. Mainstream historical fact. In classical Greece, beauty was linked to symmetry and proportion, a concept expressed in the philosophy of Kalokagathia, the idea that physical beauty reflected moral and intellectual virtue. Sculptors such as Polykleitos and philosophers like Plato believed that the perfectly proportioned human body mirrored divine harmony. This concept heavily influenced Greek portraiture architecture and societal expectations, especially among the elite. You don't need rouge here. A slight flush is permitted, even desirable, as it suggests vitality. Greek women used natural dyes made from red ochre crushed berries, or wine sediment to tint the cheeks and lips. Eyeliner, too, existed kohl or soot, carefully applied to the lash line to create that doe-eyed softness, which Greek poets adored. And then there's the skin. It should be pale but not sickly, sun-kissed but not browned, a light tan from walking the shaded courtyards of your home, but not the deep bronze of the women who labor in the fields. You're still elite, still protected from the harshest light, but you live in a place of warmth and openness. You have time for oils and perfumes. You have olive oil rubbed into your skin by a servant trained to avoid bruising. You exfoliate with fine sand and rinse with rose water. You are soft. You are balanced. You are a living sculpture. You've heard the stories. Helen of Troy, whose face launched 1,000 ships. Aphrodite, whose gaze could topple cities. But you also know that these aren't just myths. They're standards, unreachable, ethereal blueprints that everyone around you still tries to echo in the mirror-polished bronze of a vanity tray. And the men, the expectations are equally intense. He must be tall but not towering, muscular but never bulky. The ideal male form is lean, agile, symmetrical. No overdeveloped shoulders or swollen arms. Just a sculpted calm. The kind of body that looks best when still like a statue, even in motion. A man should have a straight nose, a well-proportioned chin, and curly hair that looks as though it simply grew that way without intervention. In reality, he oils it, combs it. Sometimes he burns the ends gently over a lamp to coax it into curls. But no one says so. Quirky historical tidbit. Ancient Greek men occasionally used lead-based face powder to lighten their skin, mimicking the paler complexions of the wealthy and scholarly class. While less common than among women, evidence from pottery and textual references suggests that certain aristocratic men valued a lighter skin tone to emphasize their status as non-laborers and men of leisure. And yet, for all its poetry, Greek beauty is also rigorous. If your nose deviates slightly, if your hips are too wide or your feet too small, you might be passed over politely, poetically, but completely. The pressure is intense, even if it's veiled in elegance. You remember a girl from the house across the road. She laughed too loudly, her teeth a little crooked. Her skin darkened in the summer, and never quite returned to its winter pallor. She was kind, brilliant even, but she never married. They said she lacked harmony, not intelligence, not virtue harmony. Historians still debate whether these ideals were truly followed by the population at large, or whether they were aspirational fantasies preserved in stone and lyric. What's certain is this: the Greeks wrote down their ideals. They named them. And in doing so, they solidified beauty as law, not just preference. So you sit your robe folded, just so your arms bare to the elbow, your hair oiled and bound. You smell of myrrh and frankincense, your eyes lined with charcoal dust, and your lips tinted with pomegranate paste. You know you are seen, not as a person exactly, but as a symbol, a living proof that the gods may still walk among mortals. And even as you breathe slowly, evenly, always in profile, you feel the weight of expectation pressing gently into your shoulders. You are beautiful because you are balanced, because you are quiet, because you fit a shape that was drawn long before you were born and will be measured long after you're gone. And though your reflection only flickers in the polished bronze you trusted, you have to. Because here, in this civilization of philosophers and sculptors, your face is more than your face. It's your argument. The smooth stone roads of Greece give way to something heavier, cobbled broader, structured with the weight of empire. You've left behind the mythic symmetry of the Hellenes and step now into the Roman world, where beauty is practical, performative, and deeply intertwined with public duty. Here, everything is built to last. Aqueducts, legislation, legacies, and of course appearances. You are no longer a passive object of divine admiration. In Rome, you are expected to be seen at the baths, at the forums, during festivals. And what people see must align with the values of the Republic. Then the empire order hygiene and moral strength, dressed in silk and sandals. To be beautiful here isn't simply to look soft or delicate. It is to reflect the qualities of a matrona, the respectable Roman woman. She must be modest in posture, elegant in dress, restrained in cosmetics, and dedicated above all else to the household and the idea of Roman virtue. Your hair is bound, your walk measured, your gestures small. Your beauty is less about indulgence and more about signal you are under control, and you help control the world around you. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Rome, especially among upper-class women, beauty was a reflection of one's domestic virtue and social standing. Roman writers like Ovid and Pliny the Elder recorded numerous cosmetic recipes using ingredients such as chalk saffron lead and rose water. Cleanliness and grooming were considered essential aspects of both female and male beauty. Public baths were central to this culture, reinforcing the idea that hygiene and aesthetics were signs of civility and Roman superiority. The face is expected to be smooth, slightly pale, though not sickly. You lighten your complexion with a mixture of chalk powder and white lead, sometimes softened with animal fat or beeswax. Your cheeks take a hint of rouge made from red ochre or wine sediment, lips lightly tinted with mulberry or alkanet root. But it's always subtle. The goal is not to transform, only to polish what nature gave you. Overpainting is for actresses and courtesans. And you know what they say about courtesans. Well, you hear what they don't say. You wake before dawn to start your toilette. Your maid mixes honey with barley flour to exfoliate your skin. If your household is wealthy, you might own imported cosmetics from Egypt, like kohl eyeliner or almond oil. You brush your teeth with a mixture of crushed bones and oyster shells, followed by a rinse of vinegar and mint. The taste is sharp, but it's preferable to bad breath. Public life, after all, begins at breakfast. Your hair is its own battlefield. The ideal Roman hairstyle for noblewomen changes constantly. One year it's soft waves and modest pins. The next it's towering curls piled high with bronze combs and gold-threaded ribbons. The latest trend is elaborate braids twisted into crown-like coils, held together with ivory pins. You don't do it yourself, of course. You have slaves for that. But you sit still for over an hour as they twist and oil and fuss until your scalp throbs from the weight of beauty. Quirky historical tidbit. The poet Marshall once mocked a woman whose wig was so elaborate it squeaked when she moved her head. Roman wigs were often made from German or Indian hair, one symbolizing strength, the other exoticism, and some women owned multiple pieces for different occasions. It wasn't uncommon for an upper-class Roman woman to wear false hair-dyed hair or hair extensions, all of which were carefully chosen to flatter her social image. Men, too, have their rituals. A well-groomed Roman man is clean-shaven. His nails trimmed, his toga crisp and spotless. He oils his body before bathing, scrapes it clean with a strigil, and perfumes his hair afterward. If he's especially refined, he may dab a little saffron on his wrists, just enough to suggest wealth, not softness. His sandals are polished, his teeth rubbed with baking soda or fine salt. You've walked beside such men. Perfect profiles, straight spines, voices low and confident. You know that their beauty isn't about vanity. It's about being respectable. Because in Rome, beauty isn't frivolous. It's political. You remember the statues, those massive marble figures lining the forum, the temples, the public baths. Every one of them carved with intention. Idealized muscles, serene faces, neatly parted hair. They are not portraits. They are propaganda. Each statue whispers, "This is Rome. This is order. This is what we should be." And you as a Roman woman must echo that whisper. Your appearance is part of the household economy, your body an extension of your husband's dignity. Too little care and you bring shame. Too much and you risk being called vain or worse, foreign. Balance again is everything. Historians still debate how strictly these ideals were followed across different classes. Certainly a wealthy patrician woman had more access to cosmetics and personal attendants than a merchant's wife or a slave. But the aesthetic pressures trickled down, carried by fashion gossip and poetry. Everyone in their own way was trying to look Roman enough. And what is Roman enough, really? It's not always about symmetry or softness. It's about intention. About the sense that every part of your body is doing its job. Your skin clean, your hair controlled, your voice measured, your gaze steady. You are a citizen in miniature, not just a woman. You are civilization wrapped in linen and pinned with ivory. You adjust your stola, a long gown that covers your body from shoulder to ankle, and ensure that your pallor-draped cloak lies evenly across your back. You do not show your arms unless required. You do not raise your voice unless asked. You do not eat with appetite unless no one is watching. This is Roman elegance. It is the art of moderation disguised as instinct. And yet in your own room, before the mirror-polished silver tray, you sometimes tilt your head and smile at your reflection. Not widely, just enough to acknowledge that under all the chalk oil and order, you are still there. You breathe in the scent of rosewater. You touch the edge of your brow, trace the line of your lips, admire the angle of your jaw. For a moment you are not just a matron, you are a woman. You are beautiful not because Rome told you so, but because you recognize the shape of yourself. Then you rise, you step into the corridor, and you become Rome again. You exhale slowly and the air changes once again, thicker, fragrant, laced with sandalwood, and the faint tang of calligraphy ink. The stone columns of Rome dissolve into lacquered wood, delicate silk screens, and the rustle of layered robes. You've arrived in Tang Dynasty China, and here beauty is not loud. It doesn't need to be. It arrives with quiet confidence, wrapped in velvet etiquette, and an eye for softness. You are no longer under the gaze of Roman senators or marble gods. Now you are observed through painted fans and poetry. Your value isn't just in your lineage or your husband's title. It rests in your poise, your scent, your brushstrokes, and your ability to transform a cup of tea into a performance. And through all of this, your beauty must echo harmony with nature, with status with the spirit world. The Tang dynasty, spanning from the 7th to the 10th century, was a golden age of art culture and cosmopolitan exchange. With it came refined and ever-evolving beauty ideals. Here beauty was full-bodied and graceful. The fashionable woman didn't aspire to angular limbs or hollow cheeks. She aspired to plumpness, softness, and gentle curves that suggested both wealth and inner balance. Mainstream historical fact. During the Tang dynasty, 618–907 CE, the ideal female form was notably fuller than in many other cultures and eras. Round faces, high foreheads, soft cheeks, and visible curves were celebrated features, especially during the reign of Emperor Xuanzong, whose favored consort, Yang Guifei, was known for her voluptuous beauty. Tang art and poetry consistently depicted this body type as the aesthetic norm, associating it with prosperity, health, and harmony with the Taoist-inspired worldview. Your reflection appears in polished bronze. You assess the roundness of your cheeks, the neat arch of your brows, painted, of course, since natural eyebrows were often shaved, or plucked to be redrawn in fashionable shapes. Today, the style is called willow leaf, long, sweeping, delicate. A few decades ago, it was mothwings. These names shift like the riverside wind, but the principle remains grace above all. Your skin is powdered white, not ghostly like the European ideal, but smooth and luminous like a pearl. A gentle blush is applied to your cheeks and lips, sometimes with crushed safflower or cinnabar. Your forehead might bear a tiny flower or ornamental sticker, a huadian made from paper, or gold leaf delicately placed between the brows. It's said to attract good fortune, but more than that, it tells others that you're elegant, informed, alive to the spirit of the age. Quirky historical tidbit. Women in the Tang dynasty sometimes applied blue-green eyeshadow made from malachite to enhance their eyes. Far from being a subtle detail, it was worn boldly, especially among court women during banquets and festivals. Combined with elaborate hair ornaments and silk gowns dyed in brilliant hues, Tang beauty could be unexpectedly vibrant. Your hair is your greatest canvas. It is coiled, looped, pinned into towers, or draped in waterfalls depending on the occasion. Some women wore sculpted wigs to add volume. Others affixed golden birds or jade butterflies into their coils. Hairpins weren't just accessories, they were announcements. A phoenix pin, you're married. A red blossom, you're hoping to be. A golden comb etched with a poem. You're in love with someone or with your own reflection. Maybe both. The gown you wear, perhaps a rukon made of layered silk, moves like mist. Its sleeves are long and wide, more for flow than warmth. The sashes are embroidered with scenes of cranes and lotus blossoms. Your shoes, soft-soled and high-heeled, designed not for walking long distances, but for gliding across lacquered floors. You don't walk, you float. And yet all of this softness is not weakness. It is a coded performance of strength. A woman who maintains beauty in this world must also maintain her household's reputation, perform the intricate rituals of ancestor worship, and carry herself with the quiet dignity expected in Confucian society. Historians still argue whether the Tang ideal of fuller beauty reflected actual preferences among the broader population, or was reserved for the elite. Much of what we know comes from court paintings, poems, and fashion plates, commissioned by nobles, especially men. But the sheer variety and consistency of the imagery suggests that softness was widely admired, not just performed. And then there is Yang Guifei herself, the most famous beauty of the dynasty. Her name lives on in odes, perfumes, and paintings. She was plump, musical, refined. The emperor adored her to the point of distraction. The court whispered, and when rebellion came, they blamed her. You've heard the phrase whispered in the market, beauty ruins kingdoms. But you also know it's not beauty that ruins them. It's the fear of its power. So you sit beneath your hanging scrolls, surrounded by gardenia and Guqin music. You sip chrysanthemum tea and fold your sleeves just right. Someone watches, perhaps a scholar. perhaps a rival. You let them. You've studied calligraphy. You've memorized poetry. You've balanced pigment in porcelain bowls and drawn swans in a single stroke of ink. You've wrapped your beauty in restraint not to hide it, but to make it more valuable. And when the moon rises, you apply one last touch of vermilion to your lips and step into the pavilion light. You do not smile. You incline your head, and for that moment, you are the Tang Dynasty's perfect verse, painted powdered and absolutely unforgettable. The air turns cooler now, laced with incense, and the rustle of silk against silk. Lantern light flickers through paper screens, and beyond them the moon casts its soft glow on lacquered eaves and quiet stone paths. You are no longer in the vibrant courtyards of the Tang dynasty. You've crossed into a more restrained world, where shadows are welcome, and elegance is a whisper. Welcome to Heian Japan, a time when beauty was a ritual, a philosophy, and perhaps most intriguingly an illusion. It is the 10th century, and you are a court lady. An onabugisha only in metaphor, for here the weapons are words, and sleeves not swords. You are wrapped in 12 layers of silk, known as a junihito, each dyed in precise seasonal gradients, from plum blossom pink to cloud gray to the deep green of pine needles. The sleeves are long, trailing, impossible to manage without grace. Your movements are slow, not because you are weak, but because speed is vulgar. You move like a poem. The Heian court, nestled in Kyoto, thrives on refinement. Not productivity, not conquest, aesthetic sensitivity. Poetry, music, calligraphy, scent blending, and the ability to glance downward without appearing disinterested. These are the true tests of nobility. And your beauty, like everything else, must reflect restraint, mystery, and timeless sorrow. You begin your morning long before the sun rises in the quiet company of candlelight and cool air. There is no glass mirror, only polished bronze. You do not look for flaws, you look for consistency. The canvas must match the season. In spring, you are soft. In winter, pale as snowfall. In autumn, tinged with the melancholy of falling leaves. Your entire being is an echo of the world outside your palace wall. Mainstream historical fact. During the Heian period, 794 to 1185, Japanese noblewomen adhered to highly codified standards of beauty. These included pale white powdered skin, blackened teeth, ohaguro and shaved or plucked eyebrows replaced with painted ones, all symbolic of elegance, maturity, and refinement. The practice was so normalized among aristocracy that it featured prominently in literature such as The Tale of Genji, Japan's earliest novel authored by court lady Murasaki Shikibu. Sew your face. First, the whitening powder oshiroi made from rice flour, or lead-based compounds applied to your skin, until it glows like porcelain under candlelight. You are not hiding blemishes. You are hiding humanity. The ideal face is not personal. It is abstracted like a painted screen. Then the eyebrows. Your natural ones are long gone, tweezed or burned away as soon as you reach maturity. In their place, you paint gentle arches high on your forehead, using charcoal or crushed bark ink. This isn't meant to deceive, it's meant to elevate. Your eyes look larger, your expression more ethereal. You are a mask of poetry. Next, the lips. Small, red, almost heart-shaped. Sometimes only the center is colored to give the illusion of a cherry blossom petal. You mix safflower dye with a touch of honey, applied with a tiny brush. Anything too glossy is considered childish. Anything too full improper. The more your lips look like a symbol of lips, the closer you are to perfection. And finally, your teeth. You darken them with a solution of iron filings, mixed with tea or vinegar, brushed repeatedly until your smile gleams in black. Ohaguro. It is not meant to frighten, it is meant to preserve. White teeth were seen as animalistic. Blackened teeth showed dignity, sexual maturity, and status. It was also practical. The iron lacquer prevented decay, a cosmetic act that doubled as dental care. Quirky historical tidbit. The process of blackening teeth was so ingrained that women even wrote poems about it, some comparing their inked smiles to moonless nights, others lamenting how quickly the shine faded and had to be reapplied. Entire romantic scenes hinged on whether a courtier glimpsed a lady's mouth too soon, or whether her blackened teeth shimmered behind her fan. Your hair, of course, is your most prized possession. You don't style it. You grow it, and grow it, and grow it until it trails behind you like a dark river. It's brushed daily with combs made of boxwood and scented with incense-infused oils. Split ends are carefully singed off with a heated rod. The ideal is subarakashi hair that flows straight and smooth, shining, like polished obsidian, and reaching ideally to your ankles. In courtly poems, the longer the hair, the deeper the woman's soul. You never cut it, except in mourning. You move through your day with an entire vocabulary of glances and gestures, and a glance out, a screen door, the tilt of your fan, the drop of your sleeves. Each says something. Direct speech is dangerous. Beauty lies in suggestion, not confession. You speak through poems left on lacquered trays. Your scent blended personally from cloves. Cinnamon and agarwood is left on your sleeves to linger in the hallway after you leave. Your presence must echo, never declare. Historians still debate whether these beauty rituals were truly practiced by all noblewomen, or were idealized in literary works. The tale of Genji and other monogatari describe such women in rapturous detail, but some scholars suggest these portrayals were fantasies of male courtiers, projecting aesthetic ideals rather than everyday reality. Still, evidence from diaries, paintings, and surviving comb sets suggests that many women did in fact embody these standards, if only within palace walls. Outside the court, among the merchant families and artisans, beauty was simpler. Powdered faces, yes, but fewer layers. Blackened teeth occasionally. The lines were clear if you wore 12 robes and trailed incense. You belonged to a world not meant to survive the battlefield, only to be remembered by it. And yet within this cloistered world, your life is far from idle. You write, you paint, you debate scent blends with other ladies during seasonal contests. You play the koto in soft minor keys and embroider sleeves with metaphors. Your days are quiet but never still. Your beauty is your career. Your conversation is currency. Your sorrow a signal of refinement. Tonight a suitor leaves a poem beneath your pillow. You read it by candlelight. Your sleeve brushed the wind. Now even the plum tree bends, ashamed it can't blush. You pause. You smile. Not widely. You dip your brush and reply, moonlight in my comb. I dare not rise lest it see how little I slept. You leave it on your windowsill. He'll find it before the dew dries. In this world you are not called beautiful. You are called accomplished. You are appreciated, not pursued. To be overtly desired is to be vulgar, but to be written about, painted, whispered of behind a screen, that is victory. And so you sleep tonight beneath your silk covers, hair fanned like ink across your pillow. Your breath is slow. You do not snore. Heaven forbid. And if you dream, you keep your eyes still just in case someone is watching. Because even in sleep you remain beautiful. The perfume of plum blossoms fades, replaced by a dry wind, and the faint scent of spiced resins carried from distant bazaars. Light dims behind a lattice window, casting soft shadows on walls of carved stucco. Your silks shift now darker, and edged in gold. You find yourself in the medieval Islamic world, a place where beauty is not just seen, but sensed. Not shouted, but recited. This is the age of calligraphy and kohl, where beauty is an echo of divinity and a reflection of knowledge, modesty, and grace. You are in Baghdad around the 10th century, a city that at this moment is one of the most sophisticated in the world. Here, science, art, and poetry thrive under the Abbasid Caliphate. Your world is not closed behind palace walls, but expands across continents via scholars, traders, and letters, penned in ink scented with musk. To be beautiful here is not to dazzle like a flame, but to glow like embers beneath velvet. Your eyes are your greatest feature, not because of their color or size, but because of how they are framed. Every morning you dip a small stick into a delicate vial of powdered antimony coal. You press it lightly along the waterline, and the lashes darkening the edges of your gaze until your eyes seem endless. This is no modern eyeliner trick. This is both adornment and protection. Coal is believed to ward off evil and reduce glare from the sun. And science, centuries later, will show that the trace metals in natural coal may actually help prevent bacterial infections in desert climates. Mainstream historical fact. In the medieval Islamic world, particularly in centers like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba, coal antimony-based eyeliner was a widespread beauty and medicinal tool used by men and women alike. Historical records like those from physician Al-Razi and philosopher Avicenna describe its uses both for cosmetic and ophthalmological purposes. Coal was not simply a decorative item. It was an integral part of daily grooming, religious ritual, and health care. You paint your eyes not just to be seen, but to see, and to be seen correctly. A woman of refinement may show her gaze, but not her shape. Her movement, her voice, her scent, all must suggest a deeper truth that beauty lies in balance. Your clothing is layered loose, elegant, perhaps a flowing abaya embroidered with geometric motifs, or floral patterns that whisper of Andalusian gardens. Your hair is covered, not hidden beneath a soft scarf or veil that falls like night sky across your shoulders. A beautiful woman need not reveal her hair to be admired. Instead, she speaks in poetry, moves with grace, and leaves behind a trace of rosewater on the stairwell. You don't wear perfume for others. You wear it because the prophet, peace be upon him, praised fragrance. You dab out amber or jasmine oil behind your ears, your wrists, your veil. In a culture where physical proximity between the sexes is limited, scent becomes the signature of intimacy, both spiritual and romantic. A shared glance across a courtyard means more when the air between you carries your story in molecules. Quirky historical tidbit. One famed beauty ritual among women in the Abbasid and Fatimid periods involved the use of henna not just for the hands or feet, but to tint hair, eyebrows, and even the soles of the feet. Some women would add crushed clove or saffron to the henna paste for scent and depth of color. The soles of the feet, bright orange after a fresh application, were considered both stylish and sensually symbolic in private settings. Your fingers, speaking their own silent language, are stained with henna. Not a single chaotic scribble, no. Henna is art. You've spent hours or entrusted a skilled artist to create winding vines, birds, verses of poetry, or verses that resemble them. You trace them idly while listening to your sister read from a new manuscript, a translated Greek text on astronomy, annotated in the margins with sweet named stars. When you speak, it is measured. The tone is low, the words rich. In the circles of noble women and scholars' wives, conversation is a dance of metaphor and reference. A beautiful woman is not only pleasing to look at, she is intelligent, and not shy about it. Your teeth are cleaned with miswak, a natural toothbrush made from the Salvadora persica tree. You chew the tip until it splays like a small brush, then rub gently over each tooth. It freshens your breath with a sharp herbal tang. You've heard your mother say that the prophet used it before every prayer. Cleanliness, after all, is half of faith, and in this world where water flows in fountains and bathhouses steam beneath domes, hygiene and holiness are linked. Historians still argue whether the stringent modesty often associated with Islamic beauty practices was uniformly enforced. Some claim the veil and body covering were absolute. Others point to writings, art, and travelers' accounts suggesting regional variations and periods of relaxed formality, particularly in private or all-female settings. What is clear is that modesty was of value, but individual expression thrived within its framework. Beauty was not stifled, it was redirected. And so you learn how to be seen without exposure. A well-folded veil is more powerful than bare skin. A verse delivered in a smoky voice, more potent than painted lips. Your beauty is for you, for your family, for God. You recite poetry aloud, perhaps lines by Rabia al-Basri, the Sufi mystic, who turned her spiritual longing into luminous verse, or the poetry of Walida bint al-Mustakfi, the Umayyad princess from Cordoba, who wore her verses embroidered into the cuffs of her robe. I am made for glory, and I walk with pride. In both my mind and beauty, none are my equal. You say it softly while braiding your niece's hair. She giggles and wants to paint her eyes like yours. You smile. Tell her she must be patient. Beauty is not hurried. And so the evening falls. You burn a bit of myrrh in a ceramic dish. The smoke curls around your bangles and climbs your fingertips. Somewhere outside, a call to prayer echoes. You rinse your face with rose water and turn to rest your eyes still rimmed in black, your soul light with remembrance. Here in the candlelit silence of the Caliphate's Golden Age, you are beautiful, not because you shine, but because you reflect what is sacred, what is intellectual, what is gracefully restrained. And in the dark, as you close your eyes and draw your veil over your hair once more, you know tomorrow your kohl will smudge again, your henna will fade, but your dignity, it remains untouched. The ground beneath you shifts once more, no longer paved with stone or scented by incense, but rich with the scent of dry grasses, red earth and wood smoke. A vast sky stretches overhead, and you feel the presence of community all around you, not in the chatter of markets or the silence of palaces, but in the hum of shared songs, laughter, and generations-old rhythm. You are now standing on ancient African soil among the kingdoms of the past, where beauty is not an accessory but an identity, a living story carved, dyed, braided, and honored. There is no single Africa in this vision. Instead, you travel gently through space and time, from the rain-drenched highlands of Ethiopia to the golden walls of ancient Nubia, from the Sahelian cities of the Mali Empire to the forest kingdoms of Benin. What unites them is a truth. Beauty here is spiritual, social, and unapologetically public. In the early morning, you rise not to paint a face or tighten a corset, but to shape yourself into history. You are a woman of the Akan people, perhaps, or the Yoruba. You carry with you centuries of ancestral design, passed through memory and handwork. Your mirror is polished brass or the knowing glance of an elder aunt. You do not strive to look like someone else. You strive to look like yourself at your best, your most connected, your most alive. Mainstream historical fact. In many African societies, particularly among the Dinka of South Sudan, the Ndebele of South Africa, and the Fulani of West Africa, beauty standards were deeply embedded in body modification, adornment, and communal ritual. Practices such as scarification, neck elongation, lip plates, hair sculpting, and elaborate beadwork were not simply aesthetic choices. They marked rites of passage, tribal identity, spiritual protection, and social status. You begin with your skin, not to hide it, but to present it. Smooth, hydrated, often anointed with shea butter or palm oil, your skin tells stories. Perhaps it bears geometric scars etched during adolescence, sacred tattoos of your lineage. Or perhaps your arms carry braided strands of copper wire, clinking softly as you move through the village path. Each clink is a statement, each mark a history. Your face needs no pigment. Your cheekbones are high from your mother's side, and your brow strong from your father's. But still you decorate. You crush ochre or charcoal and dust your temples. You chew kola nut to stain your tongue red. You press indigo to your fingertips before a feast. And on festival days you paint dotted patterns across your forehead and cheeks, not to erase your face, but to amplify it. Beauty here is not subtle. It is proclamation. Your hair is a sculpture carefully arranged, braided, twisted, and sometimes adorned with shells, coins, or wooden pins. Hair tells the world who you are unmarried, recently betrothed a new mother, or preparing for mourning. Among the Mangbetu people, women wrap their hair around reed frames to create elongated cone-shaped crowns called lipombo, which require hours, sometimes days, to complete. To outsiders it might seem extreme, but to you it's status, pride, and creativity incarnate. Quirky historical tidbit. Among the Himba women of Namibia, a paste called otjize made of butterfat and red ochre is applied daily to the skin and hair not only for beauty, but to protect from sun and insect bites. The mixture gives the skin a glowing reddish hue, which is considered a sign of health, beauty, and spiritual grounding. The scent of otjize becomes a signature of identity. Each woman carries a slightly different note depending on her mixture, age, and status. Your body itself is a canvas. Long necks extended with coils or padded collars are admired in some cultures, not because of a fetish for discomfort, but as a sign of elegance, an ancestral tribute. Stretched earlobes, pierced noses, or even lip plates may tell a deeper story of your clan, your region, your resilience. A young girl might giggle as her mother threads her first ear piercing. An elder woman may sit quietly as her granddaughter oils the skin around a ceremonial scar. None of this is static. Beauty changes with season, age, role, and ritual. A warrior may wear one form of ornament, a dancer another. And on the night of a full moon ceremony, the village square becomes a living gallery of style, sound, and sacred pride. You walk barefoot, not out of lack, but out of connection. Your ankles jingle with beads dyed from forest roots, and your movement is light. You are not a passive object of gaze, you participate in your own celebration. Still, beauty is not simply individual here, it is communal. Your appearance honors your lineage. It respects the elders. It signals fertility, wealth, and spiritual alignment. When you sit for braiding, it's not just a hairstyle. It's a morning of conversation, storytelling, and gossip. The girl who plaits your hair might be your cousin or your neighbor's daughter. She'll tease you about that boy who danced too close last week. And in the rhythm of her fingers, you'll feel something ancient belonging. Historians still debate the extent to which specific African beauty practices were ritual versus decorative. Some argue that scarification, for example, was primarily spiritual, while others suggest it held social or even punitive meanings. The truth is likely layered much like the designs themselves, because in many of these communities, beauty, belief, and behavior were inseparable. As day wanes, your posture remains upright. You've been trained from childhood to carry baskets on your head, to move with grace and balance. The way you walk is admired not for its seduction, but for its strength. Even the sway of your hips is praised in proverbs and songs, not as erotic, but as powerful, life-bearing, earth-connected. You are not airbrushed. You are earth-brushed. You recall the stories your grandmother told of queens who wore gold, spun into their braids of warriors, with ceremonial face paint that glowed in firelight of spirit dances, where beauty and trance intertwined. She told you once, when you look your best, the ancestors smile, and so before sleep you smooth your skin with oil. You unwrap your hair and you whisper a song she taught you as a child. The stars are visible now, clear and sharp above the savannah. Drums begin low in the distance, followed by singing. Tonight is for remembering. And you, adorned not for spectacle, but for memory, feel yourself part of something immense and eternal. Because here beauty is not hidden. It's not whispered or worn in secret. It is danced, sung, braided, carved, and witnessed in full daylight, in sacred moonlight, and in every heartbeat. The night is thick now, velvety and deep. The stars no longer blink playfully, but gaze down with the quiet, knowing look of ancient observers. In this final place, no single empire surrounds you. No one dynasty dictates your customs. You are floating gently, almost weightlessly across time itself, surveying beauty as it was as it is, and perhaps as it might always be. What we call beauty standards are not fixed. They are reflections shaped by culture circumstance and an unquenchable human desire to be seen. Welcome to the final stage of our journey, the eternal illusion of beauty. You sit before a mirror, or maybe a polished bowl, a window, a still pond, and you ask quietly, what is it that I'm supposed to look like? From medieval castles where pallor was prized like gold, to African villages where adornment was a communal rite to Persian courts, scented with sandalwood and secrecy, people have always chased beauty. But more than that, they've chased meaning through beauty. They've stitched their values into eyebrows, brushed their virtues onto cheeks, woven their faith into every curl, coil, and clasp. You recall the white lead paste used by noblewomen in Europe, the one that promised a porcelain complexion and often delivered slow poisoning instead. The mainstream historical fact remains sobering throughout the Renaissance, and into the 18th century women across Europe used lead-based makeup to lighten their skin. The resulting damage, scarring, paralysis, even death was not a deterrent, because beauty was not about health. It was about status, about sacrifice. Beauty has always carried a price. In Tang Dynasty China, it was the weight of expectation, to pluck your brows, paint your cheeks, and carry yourself like a poem in silk. In Edo period Japan, it was the layered mystery of ink-black teeth and ghost-pale skin. In 19th century Europe, corsets promised an hourglass figure, but often crushed ribs and displaced organs in the process. In Mughal harems, henna told your marital status. In ancient Egypt, green malachite eyeshadow summoned the favor of Hathor, but it also entered your bloodstream with each blink. And yet we continued. Quirky historical tidbit. In the 18th century, French aristocrats would sometimes glue tiny patches of velvet or taffeta, called mouche, or flies onto their faces. These weren't random. Each one signaled something different. A patch near the mouth might suggest flirtation, near the eye passion, near the dimple mischief. They were the emojis of the powdered wig era, stuck to the skin with spirit gum and shameless confidence. We say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but what we often mean is beauty is in the eye of society. The beholder merely borrows the lens. Historians still debate whether ancient beauty rituals were primarily for public performance or private empowerment. Were the breast-bearing gowns of Minoan Crete declarations of sensuality, or merely ceremonial? Was the henna of North African brides a spiritual shield, or a bridal marketing strategy? The answer is rarely either or. It is almost always both, because beauty has never just been about attraction. It's about survival, belonging, assertion. A woman in 16th century Venice might spend hours perfecting her coif, not to seduce a lover, but to assert her husband's wealth, her family's respectability, her place in a teetering social ladder. A man in ancient Sparta who oiled his beard before battle wasn't being vain. He was performing courage. And we still do it now. Open your drawer today, and you'll find versions of the same ancient tools, the charcoal that's become mascara, the pigmented wax that's become lipstick, the salves and perfumes that echo every civilization we've drifted through tonight. We may not grind beetles for blush anymore, but we still chase the rose glow. We may not use cow dung for depilation, but the impulse remains to tame the body mold, the face hide the flaw. Now pause. Ask yourself, when did beauty start meaning perfection? Not in the medieval world where a slightly crooked smile might suggest charm, or in 18th century West Africa, where body fat meant fertility and abundance. Not in Heian Japan, where stumbling beneath 20 silk robes made you more desirable. The obsession with flawlessness is a modern invention, an industrial one even. Mass media taught us that beauty can be standardized, that there is a type, that if you don't fit it, you must pay your way into it. And so the mirror became a judge, Filters replaced face powder. Photoshop replaced powdered wigs. But the ache behind the reflection remains familiar. Medieval women stared at their distorted reflections in polished metal, wondering if their eyebrows were arched enough. Today we pinch and prod at photos on our phones, wondering if our smile lines look too much like life. Still you light a candle. Still you brush your hair. Still you dab perfume behind your ear, not always for others, sometimes for no one but yourself. Because humans, whether in Benin or Baghdad, Paris, or Peking, have always needed moments of ritual self-appreciation. Not for vanity, but for remembrance. You are here. You have this body, this face, this time. And sometimes that's worth painting, sculpting, or decorating. But there's another truth. One quieter one, older than any empire we visited tonight. Beauty, real beauty, doesn't need an audience. It's the way your mother's hands smelled like flour when she braided your hair. The way your grandmother hummed while applying oil to your shoulders. The way your breath slows when you run a warm comb through your curls before sleep. These aren't performances. They are practices, reassurances, quiet rituals that whisper, "I'm still here." You recall stories of Boudica painted in woad before battle, not to seduce but to defy. Of Tomo Gozen's sword drawn and lashes soot darkened, galloping into chaos. Of Leithi Hoa of Kutulun, of the unnamed woman, whose mirror was buried with her because even in the afterlife, she was herself. So what happens now? You close the drawer. You fold the scarf. You wash the kohl from your lashes. You look at your face not to criticize it, but to recognize it. It is a face built from centuries of choice, resistance, longing, and love. Whether you're cloaked in perfumed veils or draped in LED glow, your face carries something sacred, history, and hope. You might draw your brows thinner tomorrow, or not. You might dye your hair or let it gray. You might try a new balm or return to olive oil and honey. Whatever you choose, do it with reverence, not for standards, but for selfhood. Because beauty isn't a goal. It's a moment, a glint of light on the cheekbone, a henna-stained fingertip, a soft sigh as you unpin your hair at night. It was never about looking better than others. It was about marking the days, the roles, the rights, the you that existed at every age, in every season, in every light. And now, as the night grows heavy and still as the last note of ancient music fades, you are left not with a prescription, but a peace. You are not medieval. You are not ancient Persian. You are not from the steppe or the Sultanate. But you are part of them now. Their rituals, their whispers, their powders and poems, they linger in the back of your cabinet, in the quiet between your routines. So tonight, sleep without judgment. Sleep without comparison. Let the mirror rest and let yourself be. Just you, browless or not. And now, as the story gently closes, let your thoughts grow slower, softer like silk slipping through your fingers. The firelight of ancient empires dims behind your eyes, and the echo of footsteps across palace floors fades to a hush. There's nothing more to see tonight, and nothing left to perform. Just breath, warmth, and rest. You are no longer trying to become anyone. You've already been everyone, each face, each brushstroke, each whispered beauty rule from a grandmother's lap to a queen's throne. The rituals may shift, but the heart behind them stays the same. The quiet wish to feel worthy, remembered perhaps even a little admired. And you are. Not because you meet a standard, but because you have a story. One written into the curve of your nose, the slant of your eyes, the texture of your skin. No one else holds that script. So now you can let go. Let the old mirrors fade, the lead powders settle in history's jar, the silk robes rustle back into the cedar chest. Let the judgment melt from your shoulders. Tonight there are no standards, no edits, no patchy powder or plucked lines to erase. You are here, breathing, beautiful not because of paint or pattern, but because you simply exist and always have. The world has looked at 1,000 kinds of beauty, but the gentlest truth of all, it's never been about what you looked like. It's about how you lived and how you loved yourself even in moments of doubt. Now sleep. Let the candle go out. Let the quiet wrap around you like a veil. And know without question that tonight you are already enough.